stepped into the quiet room with the SART nurse, which is a sexual assault response team nurse, SART. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and we were choking up. I still choke up. And I said, "Don't you cry." And she goes, "I'm not," and we're choking up. This is a nurse who's seen a bunch of stuff. That was when they say you have a chink in your armor, your armor's just getting, a cop has armor, and anybody that works EMS has their armor, and after a while your armor's just tattered and just obliterated, and that was what was happening.
Actually, he asked the girl to marry him, and she said yes. And he gave her his high school football ring, or the ring you get, senior ring, and he gave her his football jacket and his 49er hat. So she said yes, and I assumed that at that time maybe he was happy, and that was less than 24 hours before he committed suicide.
My grandma, since I was a little kid, used to come home from the bar, and be like, "You're a Wintu, don't you ever forget who you are." Because growing up in the city, I always thought I was the only Wintu. I didn't know any other Wintus. So I always felt like the last Mohican, the last Wintu. It was tough because I wasn't white enough to be white, and I wasn't Mexican enough to be Mexican. And in the old days, I was almost not even Indian enough to be Indian, because if you went full blood, a lot of them looked down to you. And so I was always fighting my whole life.
My name's Neil Shaw from Redding, California. At this point in time, I'm 53 years old, retired from Monterey County Sheriff's Department. Live here in Redding with my lovely wife, Kim, and have 3 awesome stepkids, and been very blessed in the last few years. Before I even knew I had PTSD or anything, I remember I would go to the Hawaiian Islands, and I'm like, this is the ticket. It was where I felt the most at peace. I took a lot of photographs and things like that, and then I went home and started doing oil portraits or oil paintings of tropical, scenes. I'm not a Freudian here or anything, but I'm thinking it was just a departure from the darkness of the job. So what I did is it was an escape. It was a rebellion against the darkness.
I am Susan Guiton, and I am almost 52 years old. Been a resident of Shasta County for probably 19 years, working for Shasta County Health and Human Services for 13. Stephen is my nephew. He's my sister's oldest child, firstborn. I remember when Stephen was like 2 years old, and I'd be able to babysit him, and I'd be able to take him to the grocery store, and people would think he was mine. Grew up to be a 6'2" football player.
My name's Greg Burgin Jr. I was born in Redding, California, near the ancestral village site of my Wintu people in Turtle Bay. Growing up as a kid, it was tough because I was a little bit of everything, and I moved around a lot. And so when I moved back home to find out that there's a lot of Wintus, and they're all over, and it was just real awesome, man. I just remember going to ceremony up on the McLeod and just seeing all my brothers and sisters out there. And ever since I seen that, I knew that's what I wanted to be part of.
I know that morning, Sandy got up as normal as we all do to go to work, and we have our routine, and she went into the kitchen, and Stephen was standing at the kitchen, and they have quite a view. Stephen was standing there looking out the window, and Sandy said she went up and patted him on his belly, said, "I love my boy." And I know those were the last words she said. I had no idea, not going through this before, the impact it had on my family. I look back and I think Mike and Sandy and Gracie all died that same day. And you can go through the motions, you go through the mortuary, you go through everything you need to do to really comfort everyone but yourself at a funeral, right? But no one prepared me for what I lost that day.
Well, boarding schools, they have a 4-generational effect. My family was affected by it because of my grandmother. The way that they operated those boarding schools and what they were designed to do was to take all emotion away, happiness, sadness, not to feel emotion. A lot of our people came back and became the abuser because that's what they knew growing up. And, for us, it was a lot of alcohol in our family. My grandma and grandpa used to go to the bar all the time, and then my mom drank a lot, and then eventually it turned out to where I drank a lot. It was just this vicious cycle in our family to where there was a lot of drinking involved. It took a long time for me to realize through education and understanding about what's happened with our historical trauma, which causes intergenerational trauma in our lives, and for me to really heal from that.
I don't remember the exact conversation, but he said, "I think you might have PTSD." And I'd get out of here, no way. And I dismissed it. He says, "Well, here is the card of a therapist." I did keep the card, and I kind of put it aside for a few months, and then eventually I made the appointment. I don't know, I got fed up one day maybe, and I go in and have my first visit with the therapist, and after I think it was the first hour, she says, "Well, I think you have PTSD." The title they give it is Cumulative Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. It's like a blanket that gets heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. And in any EMS kind of job, you're going to see a lot of horrific things. But we minimize the things that we're involved in, the things that we've seen, and we try to sweep it under the rug. You're diagnosed with something, it's kind of thrown in your lap, and now you have to deal with it, whether you like it or not. I didn't ask for it.
When I read Stephen's obituary, the first thing I noticed, of course, is that it said he died at home. And it was, even though I was still in shock, I knew that something was wrong with that. I thought, why would we do that when we know there's something going on in the community of 19-year-old boys that we wouldn't speak truth to people, and that teenagers are dying by suicide because there's so much agony and pain that they wanted to stop. Why would we hide it? Nothing was unturned. Nobody said the word suicide. Nobody ever tackled the truth. I think suicide is still a bad word, a dirty word in my family's house. When we were young, growing up in a very conservative family in the mountains, we were really raised that those who lived in poverty were less than, or those who lived in poverty had crime or suicide or murder, and it was never on this side. And I think now, as I grew up and of course matured and became independent and think for myself and have a heart for God, I found out that suicide isn't picky.
I hurt a lot of people. I had a lot of anger in my heart growing up as a child, and so that's what I did is I went around and I took it out on everybody. I'd fight anybody. When I first became a part of gangs, I guess that was where I found people who were my brothers and a place where I fit in. And, we did a lot of things together, and we would live and die for each other. So that was a part of my pain and my hurt, that I used gangs as an outlet in a way to express my hurt. When I first had my first child, I was around 16. It was a big change in my life. I was running around, didn't care if I lived and died, and was doing all this crazy stuff, but I had a child now to live for, and I wanted to be a good dad. And for a long part of my life, I started changing. That was the beginning of a little bit of change in me, I had to live for my daughter.
Saw a gentleman here in Redding by the name of Ed Thacker. It was good because Ed was a Vietnam vet, and he explained to me that it was okay for me to have PTSD, so I felt a little better. There's something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's called EMDR. It was very effective for me. And basically what it does, it helps your brain process the trauma better. I figured it out when I was having a very extremely stressful day, full of anxiety. When I prayed, a lot of that went away. Now, if I came out of prayer and I felt like I was still anxious, or I came out of my therapy session not feeling any better, then obviously I would have probably had to go for medication.
My grandma's been in Shasta Lake City for 35 years, so this is where our roots are from. This is where we come from. That's what brought me back here, was the lack of work. I had 2 years sobriety. I quit drinking, and then being back here, living in a tent, you know, away from all my friends and people I knew, and I had nobody to go talk to, and so I started drinking again. You know, I turned towards alcohol because I had nobody. And that's what's helped give me strength and sobriety is, you know, the sweat lodge and being a dancer and being a part of the community. And I've never been stronger than I've ever been in my life now that I've been found where I belong. I found a sense of belonging, you know, with my people again.
What's interesting is if I do start to have anxiety, instead of wondering if it's ever going to go away, what I do is I go get help and I go back to see my therapist. The upshot of this whole thing is, if you're diagnosed with PTSD, oftentimes when you're filling out forms or you're filling out a life insurance form or anything like that, it always comes up. Have you ever been diagnosed with a mental illness? This drives me nuts. There's no follow-up question or check the box, how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? How much therapy and how much treatment did you get? There's none of that. Now where I think we need to start asking that question. How are you doing? Just because you get a diagnosis of PTSD, it doesn't mean that you have this full-blown PTSD for the rest of your life. There's a huge stigma attached to it.
I got anxiety probably about a year ago, I'd say. And it was really hard for me to admit that because when I was growing up, you know, I had family members who had anxiety and I would be like, man, you're just being weak, you know, you need to be stronger. What's anxiety? That's, you know, that's like all in your head. And so I had this stigma about anxiety for a long time. And then after the third time I went in, I was thinking, well, maybe I do have anxiety because these anxiety pills seem to be helping me out. And I was always so against taking pills, you know. But when you're going through anxiety, extreme anxiety, you don't care what you got to take. I'm the vice chairman of the tribe. I'm the building manager of our Wintu Cultural Resource Center and Museum. I also facilitate a white bison program, Red Road meetings. It's like a 12-step for Native Americans, and it's my goals, you know, that's my aspirations for our people is to do good, to make this building thrive, you know, and to be a part of the community, not just help Indian people, but help all people, you know, so we can heal as a community.
Photo of me in the burnt manzanita as part of the Brave Faces project. He had me actually dress in black, and the whole intent was that this photo of me being in a blackened out forest and wearing black was going to be death. As he was setting up his camera and trying to get everything done, there were little sprigs of green grass and teeny weeny little purple flowers, and I remember this can't represent death. This actually represents new life and hope. Everyone I know has walked through the fire, but then all of a sudden there's this glimpse of some sort of hope. Then it just starts growing from there.
It's called the Brave Faces program and Stand Against Stigma. What that does is it plugs people like me into speaking engagements, people like me and people with other ailments and afflictions or past afflictions, and enables us to get out there in front of the public to let them know our story. And so Shasta County Mental Health did a photo gallery of the different speakers with their stories, and they post the photographs in prominent locations such as City Hall and County Mental Health. And I've had several people approach me and say they've seen my picture. You know, despite the difficulty, despite not wanting to talk about it, despite the risk of being, putting it out there, and the reason I do it is just not to rehash my life or anything, but it's really rewarding when you get someone that comes up to you and says, hey, I'm glad you brought that up because I've been having some issues or whatever.
I get to go and share my life with the youth and tell them my story, help them not get into some of the situations that I got myself into, you know. First I was like, how do you tell complete strangers your story? I don't have that shame anymore with it or that embarrassment that comes along with it. Now it's more like I want to tell you so, you know, it can help you in a way to save your life maybe, you know. And I see the connection, you know, because I can see it in the kids' eyes that, you know, they hear what I'm saying. So if we can help each other and educate each other and go out there and you know, give our perspective of it, then hopefully, you know, that can help change and help people in their lives and help them make the right decisions and not the wrong ones.
First of all, the reason that I want to reduce the stigma of suicide is to honor Stephen and to love him after the fact, really. Knowing Stephen in his heart, he would be right there with me, loving people and teaching the community that there's hope, how to prevent it. And part of that is just shouting from the rooftops, I'm depressed, or I need help, or I know we've gone to high schools before and we were shocked, overwhelmed at the students that admitted that they had thought about suicide or even attempted. And so I think that's a big part of it.